ancient history to some, but Jeremy Corbyn's meetings with the Czech agent and diplomat in the 1980s have been making the headlines in recent days in some newspapers. Some of these papers accusing the Labour leader of even, quote, betraying his country. Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson said the revelations prove that the Labour leader, quote, cannot be trusted. But last night, Mr Corbyn hit back with a video posted on social media.
Publishing these ridiculous smears that have been refuted by Czech officials shows just how worried the media bosses are by the prospect of a Labour government. They're right to be. Labour will stand up to the powerful and corrupt and take the side of the many, not the few. A free press is essential for democracy, and we don't want to close it down, we want to open it up.
Mr Corbyn on social media. So, Andrew Gwynn, he says for the newspapers, change is coming. What change?
Well, absolutely. We've said, and it's been our position since the general election and before, that we will implement Leveson 2, and that's the change that is precisely coming. We think that...
But just to clarify, because people don't follow this in detail, Leveson 2 would be a second stage of the Leveson inquiry. That's not a change, that's an inquiry. And it's into hacking, which couldn't be done first time, and it's into press relations with the police. So I ask again, what change is coming?
Well, the change is happening already, Andrew. What we've seen is that the influence of the newspaper media is less than it used to be. You know, at the last general election, the day before the general election, we had a 13-page smear on Jeremy Corbyn in the Daily Mail. Right. That proved not to be worth the paper it was written on. It didn't have a single impact.
I think you're quite right to say that newspapers don't have the political limit.
But that's fine. The change that's
coming.
not
been brought about by Labour or by policy.
No,
that
by
is
social media,
that's a systemic change.
By falling in circulation.
I ask again, what change would Labour bring? What would you do to stop stories like the ones that we were just talking about there, which you obviously, let's take it for granted, you think they're just a tissue of nonsense. What change would you make to stop them being published?
Well, I think tissue of nonsense gives it over-credence, you know.
But what change?
Well, the changes are that we want to open up the press. We talk about having a free press, and I think we should be proud of the fact that we have freedom of press. But it's not freedom of press when you have 71% of the media in the hands of
You're giving me the analysis.
exiles.
Excuse me. You're giving me the analysis to justify the change. I understand that. That's what Mr Corbyn did in his social media posting. I'm trying to get from you, what change would Labour make in the law? What would you do to stop stories like this being published? What would you do to stop papers reporting the claims of a former Czech spy? Well, what would you do?
That's why Leveson 2 is important. It is about...
It's an inquiry.
Well, yes, and inquiries then make recommendations to government. And what we want to do is we want to break the dominance of 71% of our media being in the control of tax exiles.
I'm sorry, Mr Gwynn. Leveson 2 is not about media dominance. It's about what I've just said it is. So let me try one more time. How would you change? How would a Labour government change the regulations and reporting rules for the media?
Well, we want to make sure that there is a genuine free press.
How would you do that?
Well, we would go forward by bringing forward measures that make sure that the press is not only free, but also...
What would these measures be? Well, would you ban foreign ownership?
Well, that's to be decided by Tom Watson and his shadow team.
So you don't know?
Well, look, Andrew, the point is that we've got a situation here where 71% of the media is in the control of tax exiles. We want them to be paying tax.
Is Rupert Murdoch a tax exile?
We want them
is Rupert Murdoch a tax exile?
We want them to be paying tax in this country.
Is Rupert Murdoch a tax exile?
I'm not going to get into individuals, but you know that the dominance of the press barons in this country is not healthy for democracy.
So would you ban foreign ownership?
Well, that is one option that may be on the table.
Maybe.
But,
so with the change that's coming, we just have no idea what the change is.
But change has to come because we can't go on with media barons being able to present smears as fact and as news.
Now you're back to the analysis. You won't tell me what that leads to. So let's move on with Steve Baker. The Defence Secretary says Mr Corbyn has, quote, betrayed his country. In what way?
Well, the Defence Secretary's chosen his own words. I mean, the point for me about this debacle
has
is
he
that we
betrayed
believe...
his country?
Well, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, is a grave danger to this country, but that's because
has
of the...
he betrayed the
but
country?
that's because of the ideas in which he believes and what that would mean for our economy and our society.
People have all sorts of ideas. But your Defence Secretary, our Defence Secretary, the Defence Secretary of this government, of our government, has said the leader of Her Majesty's opposition has betrayed his country. In what way has he betrayed his country?
Well, that really is a question for Gavin Williamson. That's not the word.
So you don't agree with it?
Well, I'm not really commenting on the...
Well, do you think he's betrayed the country?
I think that Jeremy Corbyn is a grave danger to our country.
But that's a political point. That's a different... Of course you do. Everybody in one party thinks the other party is a grave danger. Betrayal is an entirely different matter. That's a serious accusation. I just point out that a senior figure in the Czech Republic Defence Ministry says Sarkozy, who is the former Czech spy, it's his real name, is a liar. That's the exact word. The director of the Czech Archives on security says no files show Mr. Corbyn cooperating with Czech intelligence. The German archivists say there are no Stasi files on Mr. Corbyn at all. So I ask again, in what sense has Mr. Corbyn betrayed this country?
Well, Andrew, I'm not going to comment on that. As you've suggested, this is an area where there's lots of questions to answer.
Well,
we've got a free press in this country. The free press is asking the questions. They should be answered.
Yeah, but it's not just the free press. Your fellow Tories are all piling in as a result. Your security minister, again, the key word security minister, he's compared Mr. Corbyn to Kim Philby. Kim Philby was a traitor. At the time, if he'd been found guilty, he would have been hanged. That's an outrageous smear to say of the leader of the opposition.
Well, Andrew, I'm not going to allow you to draw me into potentially libelling anybody, and so I'm not going to comment on that.
So you don't agree with that either? So
Well,
you don't agree with the Defence Minister, you don't agree with the Security Minister?
But this is classic dead cat strategy, isn't it? The government's on the ropes on a whole range of issues, from NHS crisis, children's services are in crisis.
I've got the government on the ropes, and you've just interrupted.
The domestic agenda.
Let me try and keep him on the ropes. A Tory backbencher, MP, Ben Bradley, he tweeted that Mr. Corbyn had, quote, sold British secrets to communist spies. Sold British secrets to communist spies. So clearly without evidence that he then had to delete it.
Well, that really is a matter for Ben. But what I would say to you is that we believe in a free press in this country. The questions have been asked. The questions need to be answered.
I'm asking, do you think that Mr. Corbyn can be compared to Kim Philby? Do you think that he has in any way betrayed this country? Do you think he sold British secrets? Do you think any of that?
I've got no evidence for any of that, and so I won't make any...
So why do your colleagues?
Well, that's a matter for them, Andrew.
Surely the real scandal, Mr. Baker, isn't what Mr. Corbyn has supposedly done or not done. It's the outright lies and disinformation that your fellow Tories are spreading. That's the real scandal, isn't it?
I'm not going to accuse my colleagues of lies or disinformation. They will need to defend what they've said.
Well, I would put it to you, it's clearly a lie on any evidence so far available to us that Mr. Corbyn sold British secrets to the communists. Agreed?
I've got no evidence to make a judgment
so
either
to claim
way.
so would be a lie.
Well, the question's been asked. The question should be answered. But it's not for me to sit here on your programme inventing evidence and reaching a conclusion myself. It's not something I'm willing to do.
You leave that to your Tory colleagues. Mr. Corbyn just finally said that the British press had gone a bit James Bond in that video. Mr. Corbyn does realise that James Bond was on our side.
Absolutely, yes. But I think the real issue here, Andrew, and you've hit the nail on the head, is that these are fabrications. You know, they are at best made up. At worst, they have been designed to deflect from the crisis the government's in.
Well, I'm going to stop you there because I think you will agree that we've kind of done that.
Well, we have.